Hi all, I'm Lucie Lelumière. I'm the president of Interactive Ontario. Interactive Ontario represents the video game and interactive digital media industry in Ontario. So today, my colleagues from the provincial associations across Canada, as well as our partners, the Canadian Trade Commissioner's Service, Ontario Creates, and the Canada Media Fund, are pleased to welcome you. We're very excited. Today's talk is about learning about opportunities for Canadian video game studios, whether it's publishing or raising capital in the thriving video game industry in the Nordic countries, especially Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. So this talk will lead some of you today to the Nordic Game at the end of May, and to the many others, it's going to give you ideas in terms of potential partners from the Nordic countries. So before we start, some housekeeping. We have a packed schedule. Today we have 4 speakers, in fact 5 speakers. And what we're going to do is, in between each speaker, we're going to stop for 1 or 2 questions, unless we don't have time. But if we have time, we'll do this. And then at the end, we're going to have a 20-minute of general Q&A. So your questions, put them in the Q&A section. That's the bottom right button. Bottom right button, Q&A. So that's where we're going to be able to see your question and address them. So we will wrap up in about an hour and a half. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our first speaker, Jakob Riz. Jakob is the program director at Nordic Game Resources. They are the organizers of Nordic Game and the Nordic Game Discovery Contest. So Jakob started his career as a game journalist over 20 years ago, and he was the editor for several games magazines. After working with several outlets, including the official PlayStation magazine, the Danish edition, he dove deeper into the industry as the editor of Manual. That's the first industry-specific outlet in the Nordic region. There, he was headhunted to be part of the Nordic Game program, which later turned into the Nordic Game Conference, where he's been serving for many years now. In 2017, he and partner Teddy Floria invented and introduced the Nordic Game Discovery Contest, currently in its 5th season, and now an integral part of the Nordic Game concept. So I'll pass it on to you, Jakob.
Well, thank you for the nice introduction. I think I wrote it myself back in the day. Hello, everybody. I am the program director at the Nordic Game Conference. We have become one of the most significant, I guess, conferences for the industry, and that took us several years and a lot of headaches, but we're really happy to be where we are and able to serve as kind of the gateway to the Nordic games industry, encompassing Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Faroe Islands, Greenland, and Iceland. I think not many great games coming out of Greenland these days, but who knows? And so we gather most of the developers from the region for a week of sharing knowledge, having fun, meeting each other, doing business. And it's also an invitation for everybody outside the Nordic region to come inside to our grand family and meet all the incredible talent that is within our industry. And so after Corona, normally, obviously, we are inviting people to come to Malmö in Sweden to enjoy a physical conference there. But, don't want to go into the boring details about why we are not doing that. But I want to say that we are doing it digital now. And the next conference is called NG21 May. It's in the end of May. I know a lot of you, I hope, already know about it. A lot of Canadian devs. We are doing a Canadian delegation that are coming to, at least virtually coming to the conference. And the rest of you, why should you? Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons. Our tagline is Nordic Game, Knowledge, Emotion, Business. And I think that a lot of conference goers knows about what knowledge and business is. Knowledge, obviously, we have a large program of speakers. We're doing a live stream from our Nordic Game studio, and we have a bunch of great talks that are pre-recorded in our archive. I would say around 50, 60 speakers all in all throughout the 3 conference days. And for the business component, we're working with Meet to Match, a matchmaking meeting system that we've been working with for, I think, almost 15 years now, and really, really happy with. Ensuring that you as a company or a developer can get in contact with the people that you want to meet, and not waste a lot of time of having meetings with people that also are trying to sell the stuff that you're selling. So really happy with Meet to Match. Part of Meet to Match is also the publisher market. If you're a developer, you want to meet with publishers, you can step right into this dedicated area of Meet to Match to get one-on-one video meetings about your, hey, Jason, thanks for that chat. And meet with the publisher there. We are expecting around, I would say, 30 publishers and 60 developers meeting up. That's kind of our forecast for that. So that's kind of the normal part of a conference. And then we have the emotion part, and that is where my heart lies with the Nordic Game, because there's something magical about doing a conference that is not national but regional, because that means that the place that you meet is for everyone. It's like a family reunion, whether you're from within the region or you are from outside. You're never one of the family. You're always part of the big family, and I think that is one of the sales points that we have. And normally, physically, you would understand by going to Malmo, meeting all these people in the panel as well. Now that we are digital, we really try to convey the same kind of Nordic vibe into what we do. We have a Discord channel that is really popular, and a string of ways to make you feel like you're part of the family, and to talk about the games and what you do and all that stuff. So I can only encourage you to join me and all the fine people in the panel for Nordic Game in the end of May. That was my 5-minute pitch. I hope you enjoyed it, and good luck to the rest of the panelists of matching that talk.
Thank you, Jakob. We're going to put the link to the Nordic Game, as well as the link to registering to the Canadian mission to the Nordic Game. So we'll put that in the chat, and we'll take time for 1 or 2 questions, because Jakob, I think you cannot stay with us, correct?
That is correct. I have to to family business.
Okay. So we don't have a question, but we have a comment that Nordic Game is quite similar to Mix in Montreal. So it is very prominent. It's a large event with incredible quality of publishers, investors, colleagues producing video game content. Go ahead.
Sorry, but I think you missed the first sentence there on the chat. I think you
Yeah, absolutely. So Jakob is a rock star. Okay, so you'll get more fans today as well.
I just needed that. Oh,
all right. So I think we are going to move on to the next speaker. I'm going to introduce. Thank you, Jakob. Okay. See you virtually.
Yes.
At the end of May. Bye. All right. So our next speaker is Anton Albion. Anton is the project manager, business acceleration, events, HR, and education at Data Spells Branchen. So Anton, you have 10 years of experience in the games industry. Anton previously worked at Mohang, the makers of Minecraft. I think everybody knows Minecraft worldwide. That's great experience, by the way. And now is a project manager at the Association of Swedish Game Developers. Anton is responsible for internationalization. Yeah, I didn't think that would be the word that stumble about. So trade missions, events, supporting independent game developers. Anton is the main organizer of the Nordic Party at GDC and Gamescom. Too bad we cannot be there physically this year. And the Invest in Games conference, as well as the Indie Game Dungeon Stockholm and Swedish Game Awards. Anton is a co-founder of the transnational business accelerator BBEG and has supported many development teams as an intermediary in investments and partnership. I pass it on to you, Anton.
Thank you. Wow, I've never been so properly introduced ever before. I feel like, thank you so much. I'm gonna share my screen here for you guys. Let's see here, where did I do that? Right, so here we go. I work as a project manager, like stated there, and we are an association of Swedish game developers. We organize a lot of different companies, small, big, big and large, small and indie. It's a wide range of companies here. So here in the background, you can see a bunch of them. And the Swedish games industry has grown a lot just the past few years. I've been working here. We've grown to 3.5 billion in revenue. That was 2019, and it looks like 2020 won't be any different or bigger, at least. We have over 450 companies in Sweden developing games and over 9,000 people employed in the games industry. So, and it's growing every day. And now we have these big companies that are publicly traded as well, like Embracer and EG7 and Paradox, and a lot of different investments going back and forth. So there's more capital now than ever in Sweden, and which I'm like 10 years ago might have been a different story. So there's definitely power dynamics changing in the industry as a whole as well. And here you can see a bunch of different games made in Sweden, everything from like casual titles like Candy Crush to more hardcore games like Battlefield and Valheim and Vermintide, and or like indie darlings like Minecraft, which, well, I guess is not that indie anymore, but it was, and the Totally Accurate Battle Simulator and games small and big. It Takes Two, personal favorite from Hazelight, a pretty new game, doing pretty well. So yeah, I would actually like to hear with you if you think, I think Sweden and Canada would have some similarities in tradition of engineering, long dark winters. It's cold. We probably, we both have a love for pop culture. I think is similar between Sweden and Canada. I grew up watching a lot of your comedy shows, yeah, stuff like that. And I think both are quite small countries compared to like our neighbors in Germany or your neighbor down south. So we have, I think, kind of a underdog perspective when making games, which might help actually, because you might think globally more than you think nationally. If we compare to Germany, for example, we have a lot of Germans making games for other Germans rather than making games for a global audience, which I think is has been to the upside for the Nordic developers, because we think globally from day one. I wouldn't actually say born global, maybe born Western these days, because we don't really have that connection to Japan or China as we might hope sometimes. Also, we might, I think our welfare states help a lot for creating new companies and getting more entrepreneurs actually trying out to make games, which is not really like if you would do a risk analysis of a career, making games might not be your first choice. But unless you have free education and a welfare state, and you can get support from systems around you. So I think we have a lot of common best practices for supporting a games industry. Maybe a Lutheran work ethic is something we might share as well. I'm not I don't have many insights in Canadian traditions like that, but at least for the Northern Europe, we kind of are much like that. So, well, I could rabble on forever about Swedish games industry, but I might bring you in for questions on who you should talk to or where you should go. And we as an association are kind of the family for the industry, so we can connect you to wherever you want to go. And my email is right there. All right.
Thank you, Anton. So I have one question for you. What would you think is the main opportunity for Canadian video game studios working with your industry?
I think maybe investment. There's a bunch of, like I said, on publicly traded companies right now, not just Embracer and Paradox, but also smaller ones like Sordix, Thunderful, and EG7, and that are invited to a follow-up event to this, I think, as well. So there's a lot of competition, I would say, between investors right now, and there's more capital than we have ever seen before. So I think that would be my main point, that there's a lot of capital.
It makes a lot of sense, and obviously it's very attractive to Canadian studios. One logistics question. Someone is asking if your deck is going to be available, or a version of it for distribution.
Sure. I mean, this is just the slide. So you mean this slide, or?
The slide, and we're going to ask everybody if they're okay with distributing the slide. But yeah, of
course,
I think people want the information you have on your slide.
Of course, yeah. I can give you a list of the things I said, like in text.
Okay, thank you. All right. So thank you, Anton. We're going to move on to Suvi Latva. Suvi is the Chief Business Advisor, NeoGames, Finland. She's one of the founding members of NeoGames Finland. Her main responsibility there is to connect and keep in touch with Finnish game developers and their potential partners. She also worked on research on the Asian market for games. She provides coaching for fresh game startups and many more things. So surveys, Suvi's journey into the game industry began 20 years ago, when her industrial design studies kept veering more and more towards 3D modeling and design. And throughout her journey, she finally landed a master program for media and design technology. Suvi later took charge of a game industry ecosystem project, and that project opened the door to other initiatives, and her becoming one of the founding members of NeoGames Finland. So I'll pass it on to you, Suvi.
Thank you. I didn't remember. It was quite a long. Sorry, that was the whole history of mine. Thank you. So I am Chief Business Advisor in NeoGames Finland. So I'm the one if you want to contact any Finnish game company. And let's see how I succeed. I have quite a lot on my table, so sorry about that. But let's see, how do I manage with that? Yep, here. Okay. So there is always a competition between Sweden and Finland because we compete with the ice hockey and game industry, and that's the thing. We also cooperate, but there is a obvious competition, and our numbers are are in euros, but I must say that the number of studios is half compared to Sweden. It's 220. We don't have the recent numbers exactly because we are currently finalizing our study. We normally do the Finnish game industry study every second year, and we interview I would say 80% of the studios for that. So that's quite a lot of work. So that's why we do it every second year, and we haven't got all the numbers yet, so we are not able to reveal the latest numbers, but we are going to reveal those on the beginning of June. So if you go to neogames.fi, you will find the latest report, and of course I can share it with our Canadian friends. Amount of employees is quite small in Finland. It's in the game industry. It's only 3,200, and as you might be familiar, there was we have quite a strong history with the mobile phones, and regarding to that, we obviously have quite a lot of mobile game development also, and it's still, even that Nokia is not there anymore in that sense. It's still a major platform for development, although PC and console development is rising. And total turnover was in our last estimate for 2019, it was 2.2 billion euros. And as said, the accurate numbers will be in June in our websites and in our this kind of project website, which is playfinland.fi. And some notable Finnish success stories from Finnish game industry are, of course, Rovio's Angry Birds, and then Supercell's Clash of Clans, Brawl Stars, and Small Giant Empires and Puzzles are the kind of the most famous things, IPs and games from Finland. And of course, what we do in Neo Games, we try to connect all these kind of famous and successful games to the Finnish game industry, and embrace also the smaller studios with the success of the bigger studios. I don't know how much time I'm taking. And it's not only mobile, so we also have a quite strong PC and console development, although that it's quite a small amount of companies, but they are fine. So there is control. Just a few 1 year ago, Remedy was releasing Control, and tomorrow will be release date for the Returnal by Housemarque, and then there has been a lot of Trine sequel from Frozen Byte that has been quite great. Also in the indie side, so not only like this kind of big mobile superstars and AAA productions, but there is also strong development in indie side. So Papa Is You and Noida has been quite appreciated indie titles. And then there, I might not be able to think about how could we actually proceed with the cooperation with the Canadian companies, because I don't know enough about the Canadian game industry. But and with the mobile, I think that it's always the publishers are maybe not so trending in Finnish mobile game studios. So I think that if we are looking for publisher deals or publisher cooperation, it goes more to the PC and console side. And then there is, of course, mergers and acquisition option. So there is quite a lot of solid companies in Finland, and also for investment. Actually, it was there was a plus 75 million US dollars invested on last year, even that it was a pandemic year. Of course, those investments were prepared already earlier, but there is obviously there is a quite attractive Finnish game studios that maybe Canadian money is also welcome to our industry. But I need to know maybe more about the Canadian game industry to be able to find the opportunities for cooperation. But that, I think that was my 10 minutes or 7 minutes or something.
Thank you, Suvi. So you're saying that you'll know more how to recommend next steps for Canadian game studios when you hear more about what they're looking for.
Yep.
That said, you are confirming that there's a lot of investment opportunities right now in the Finland market, correct?
Well, a lot. Of course, I think that the quantity is better than quality. So it also depends, like if you are looking for seed companies that are looking for seed funding or maybe a little bit more advanced companies. So there are definitely, maybe if I would be honest, I think that there would be 5 to 10 like VC potential companies. So because I'm quite harsh on that, like how I estimate and how I kind of describe which companies are actually able to raise money. There's a bunch of companies which are saying that we are willing to raise VC money, but they are not actually able to. So that's my cynical side of 20 years.
Well, that's good. So people can contact you directly.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
I forgot to say that there is a Play Finland Facebook group where is 6,000 members. It's quite a good channel to follow what's going on in Finnish game industry. So it's mostly English. The posts are mostly in English, so it's easy to follow. So please go there.
And could you put it in the chat after? That would be awesome. Yes. We have one question from Jason. And by the way, Jason and the team, we all think that you guys are all rock stars. So Jason is asking you to comment on VCs from Finland and if they are investing outside of the Nordic region. You've already a bit addressed this, but yeah, are they investing outside of the Nordic region?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that both, like there is Play Ventures and Caesar Ventures at least outside of Finland, but I am pretty sure that both are investing also outside of Nordic countries. Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. All right, thank you. We're going to move on. Well, in fact, the question we have about if people can connect with you, we have the answer, but I want to say that the trade commissioners, the Canadian trade commissioners, can also help you tremendously in these markets. So that's something else that we can provide you with the contact information as well. So thank you, Suvi.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Jesper. So Jesper Crow Christensen is a game consultant at Vision Denmark and Danish Producers Association. So Jesper is a game developer, audio designer, author, and journalist. And he now works at Denmark's national business cluster, Vision Denmark. Jesper works to grow the Danish game industry as part of the digital visual sector to an international position of strength through data analysis, workshop, events, and matchmaking. Passing on to you, Jesper.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me. So yes, I probably overdid this, but let's get going. I got a lot of slides. As you heard, yeah, I'm from Vision Denmark, the Danish business cluster for digital visual industry. And I'm here to talk to you about the Danish games industry. So like the Danish games industry is like the runt of the litter when you look at like the Nordic region, because we have, these are some of the main figures also in euros, which shows that we're definitely the smallest. Although we have a fair amount of companies registered, if you look at, you know, the amount of turnover and exports we're generating, but relatively few people employed, and most of them concentrated in Copenhagen. And I think that you could actually say that these days, Copenhagen and Malmö, which is just, you know, 20 minutes away by train, is probably like one big cluster with people from Copenhagen working in Malmö and people in Malmö working in Copenhagen. Yeah, and these figures are from 2019 because of Corona, everything's delayed. So I also wanted to say, well, what does these numbers mean if I'm going to like paint a portrait of the Danish games industry? Well, we have a lot of smaller companies. The majority of revenue is generated by a few major players. It's geographically concentrated around Copenhagen. There's a few other clusters as well, but the majority is in Copenhagen. And the home market is insignificant unless you're targeting children, which means that game developers in Denmark, they focus like on the international market from the get-go. So, and if I were to talk a bit about the current trends in the Danish games industry, which probably also are very much the same in Finland and Sweden since we're so close. But what we're seeing is there's an increasing maturity in the sector, with companies living longer, becoming more solid, more professional. We're also seeing what I call like reinvestment accelerating, which means that we're beginning to see in Denmark a pattern that looks a bit like in Sweden, where some of the money that comes into the industry gets reinvested in new startups in the sector, which we are super happy about. And there's also an increasing number of like mid-sized developers. So this picture of like a few very big ones and a lot of very small ones are changing a bit. So also I wanted to give you like examples of some Danes you might know, like, well, what kind of games do Denmark produce? Well, the first one's actually not a game, but Unity. And you're thinking, Unity? That's American, isn't it? Yes, it is now. It was actually started in a basement in Copenhagen. And that's more to tell you that Unity is a great part of the Danish games industry identity. And Unity is by far the most used engine, because in the old days, the old CEO, David Helgerson, he used to go around to all the parties and pass out like free Unity keys to get people to use his product. Of course, there's IO Interactive, who like kickstarted game development as a professional business. They've done Hitman and Ken & Lynch and other stuff, and they're now independent again and are doing really great. Cyber, you may not know Cyber, you probably know Subway Surfers, like the endless runner that won't die. The most downloaded mobile game in the world, I think, in the billions of downloads. And of course, Playdead, which is like the prototypical art house indie with like 4 BAFTAs to the name and making like very, very finely crafted games. And I also wanted to show you like what are some examples that you might not know. Deep Rock Galactic, a new hit that's doing like games as a service, which is like a slower growing Valheim than Valheim. From Ghost Ship Games, we have Tactile, which is a kind of they're not making a big fuss about themselves, but they're growing really fast, and they're actually as big as Cybo now. And we have like people like Triband who do what the golf and do these creative experiments. They're also like great business. So opportunities for collaboration, that's why you're here, right? So actually in Denmark, there's a very, very, very good opportunity in that there is a Canadian-Danish development fund. It's not a lot of money, but everything helps, and it's soft money, so you don't have to pay anything for it. You can keep it. And it's co-funded by the Canadian Media Fund and the Danish Film Institute, who also like choosing the projects that will get funding support. You'll get this presentation afterwards, so I put in the link so you can go in and read some more about it yourself. But that's super obvious to look into that. Like publishing in general, Denmark is like pretty publisher deprived. So pretty much every Danish developer, unless they're self-publishing, will be looking for a publisher. And also I think that there's an opportunity in funding, especially seed funding, because that's an underserved area in Denmark. And actually there are some state initiatives that allow you to get additional funding from the state. So if you go in and invest in the Danish game developer, there are some opportunities for the state to go in and grant an additional loan or even additional funding along with your investment. And it doesn't matter if you're from abroad, as long as you invest in a Danish company. I put in a mail address here for my contact at the Vækstfonden, which is the program that does these things. So if you want to know more, shoot him a mail. And I was also asked, what are our plans for Nordic Game? Well, actually, we don't have too many plans. We'll be there. So look us up if you want to talk about the Danish games industry. But we're actually quite spent because only yesterday we had like our big event of the year, which is like a narrow focused one, but also like a matchmaking event that's only for publishers, investors, and Danish game developers. So after that, we are completely spent, and we're just building up over the next couple of months. And if you want to know more about the Danish games industry, it will probably be there next year as well. So in 10 months, try and look it up, and we'll be ready for it. And we also have like our own small conference planned for October 27th in Denmark, like secondary hub for game development, which is Aarhus. But again, I'll be at Nordic Game. If you want to talk about the Danish games industry or some of the other stuff I mentioned, go ahead and book a meeting with me. Yeah. So that's it. Feel free to get in touch. I have a mail address, which apparently when transporting the PowerPoint to a Mac, the font went missing. So that's why my email address is in 2 lines. I'm sorry. And I also have like this interactive DK, which is like the official handle for VC Denmark. And there's Vanilla Ace, which is like my personal account, if you want to see some of my ramblings. So that's it for me.
Thank you. By the way, I had no idea that Unity was invented in Copenhagen.
Yes, in like a very working class neighborhood.
Wow. So we don't have specific questions, but I'm glad that you raised the fact that we have a Canada-Denmark fund for interactive digital media projects, and it's run here by Canada Media Fund. So to your knowledge, Jesper, has there been companies that have leveraged that fund yet for projects between Denmark and Canada?
Yes, there has been, and actually, and it's been like there's been both good and bad examples. So actually, before this, I actually mailed out to like to a group of developers in like a network, like, oh, what is your opinion on this? Because I had heard like mixed results, but the general consensus was that it's a very good program, but and it was just like growing pains. So it was kind of learning how to work with Canadians. That was like that was an issue that was about to be solved, and that it actually looked like a very good program once that challenge was overcome and people had learned, how do we work together across the Atlantic Ocean.
So that's good to know, because we are going to organize meetings between companies from Denmark and other European countries and Canadian studios for them to be able to leverage those international incentives that the Canada Media Fund put forth. So certainly we will reach out to you, Jesper, to know more so we can better organize it, and it will likely be mid-June. And obviously, as you mentioned, people can talk to you during the Nordic Game as well, or before, by reaching out to you. So thank you. Anything else before we move on, Jesper?
I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to move on to Susanna Mesa-Graham. She's the co-founder and chairwoman of the board of Albion. Susanna is a seasoned games industry professional with extensive experience in making companies, their business, and people grow. She's an active board member and investor in several game and tech companies worldwide, including, I'm very proud to say, Toronto-based True Love, which is an AI/game company. Susanna is also the creator, in fact, she's also investing at the creator-led, corporately owned movement Glitch, which is backing bold new forms of play and the people who define them. Susanna is the co-founder and chairwoman of independent investment company Albion, as I mentioned before, which she runs with 2 business partners. Albion focuses on games and tech funders in early stages and currently has 23 holdings. In her previous roles at CMO and COO, she helped grow Paradox Interactive from the ground up into one of Sweden's largest games companies. Over the course of 14 years, she took the company through a number of phases, including a successful IPO and listing. And I'm glad to see that, Susanna, you have spare time. Absolutely, to support organization. And Yeah, to support an organization and individual working with societal impact in different ways. So I'll pass it on to you, Susanna.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that very nice introduction. Let's see if I can share my screen here. There we go. So I am super happy to be here talking to you. I had the pleasure of trying to condense the Nordic games industry, which you've already probably seen is fairly diverse, even though we have a lot of things in common. So a little bit of this is going to be an extrapolation. It's going to be very much my perspective, but also the perspective of the people that I work with and that I talk to. I've been in the industry for a while, so I have a bit of, a few years of perspective. My goal with this is to get you super excited about some of the opportunities that exist in the Nordic region, understand it a bit better, and also have a little bit of a think about where you can fit in depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve into our ecosystem. So let's go. So the introduction I thought was pretty good. Let me just see if I can move this over here. Just a couple of things that I wanted to say. I do quite a lot of these things. I'm meeting with the Embassy of Colombia next week to talk about the Nordic Games ecosystem, and I'm super happy to be talking to you today. When it comes to Albion, we are a smaller privately owned investment company, and I think what's exciting about the Nordic ecosystem is that we're certainly not alone. So there, as was mentioned before, people and companies who have created something in the industry are able to pull back investment into the ecosystem, thus making it grow. And that way it's almost like, it accelerates on its own merits. But of course, we have a lot of other interests as well and other stakeholders who are supporting that. So I won't say too much more about me, but feel free to reach out. I have my contact information there, and I'll also have it in the end of the slide. And you will also get this slide afterwards, so you don't have to take any notes. You can just relax. Okay, so the Nordic ecosystem. I took this beautiful Nordic Games conference logo, and in fact, the theme of the Nordic Game conference, which is knowledge, emotions, and business, could almost be the theme of my life. And I think it explains a lot of our ecosystem, and I think it has been one of the reasons why it's been so successful, because it is very relationship built, very relationships driven. So we have a very diverse studio landscape, as you've seen from the presentations beforehand. There's small companies, there are bigger companies, there's listed companies, there are unlisted companies. We have everything from one-man companies to mid-size and larger studios. So I think depending on your goals and depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve with your own studio, there are a lot of different opportunities here to learn, to collaborate, but also to profit from, I guess. There are diverse funding options. Like I said, we have a thriving listed environment, especially in Sweden, with a lot of companies who have filled their coffers or their wallets to be able to make acquisitions and to be able to make investments. But also, of course, on the publishing side, there's opportunities to have your game funded by a publisher and also published on the market. There's a lot of experience. I'm gonna take a little stroll down memory lane in the next slide, but there's experience not just in game development, but also in business. So how do you build games? How do you build businesses and games companies and studios that last over a long period of time? And I think that's actually a super strong aspect of our ecosystem. And again, collaboration, but also learning from. It's had its fair share of success, which means that success breeds more success, not just in terms of capital coming in, but also lessons learned, contacts made. The smaller studios take after some of the bigger studios, see what they do and learn from that. And their journey is accelerated because we have a lot of successful cases on our markets. It is very collaborative, and I come back to this all the time. I think maybe this is the case for several ecosystems in games, but just in general, it's not just the CEOs getting together and talking about the challenges that they're facing, or the CFOs, or there's a lot of collaboration on all levels, and a lot of sharing of projects, sharing of disciplines. I've even seen people lend out employees to avoid having, to lay someone off if you have downtime in one studio, but you're very, very busy in another studio in dialogue with employees. Then, do you want to come over here and work for a couple of months while we have a downtime, and then come back? Learn something along the way, and at the same time, we avoid having to lay people off and things like that. So just that mindset, I think, has contributed a lot. And also, not to mention, we have thriving ecosystems around our own ecosystem. So the tech ecosystem, for instance, with Slosh, and the Stockholm ecosystem is very, very strong. We have several unicorns coming out of the Nordic tech scene. We learn a lot from them, but we also share a lot of collaboration in terms of employees. Employees come from tech into games and vice versa, and that way there's a lot of cross-pollination between the industries, and we can grow together. The ed tech scene is also very strong. So I think that has also contributed to our ecosystem. But it hasn't always been like this. And I was digging through an old archive a couple of weeks ago, and I found this article from myself when I was setting up the US office in New York for Paradox in 2006. And the article is in Swedish, but it basically says, oh, the computer games industry is in trouble. They're always in trouble. All the headlines are just doom and gloom, but there's one exception. And it goes on to talking about the investment that Paradox was doing at the time in setting up a US office. And so I think one thing that I saw, having been in the industry from 2004 and seeing the Nordic industry grow during this time, is that we were very well poised for when the digital revolution came. So while people were still talking about, are we gonna do digital? Are we still gonna, the stores are never gonna disappear. We're always gonna be reliant on box copies, etc. The companies here were already working on their digital versions of getting games out. And it was the way also to have a little bit more control of your own destiny. Printing things had a huge cost in the beginning that a lot of companies couldn't afford. And moving over to digital meant that more companies could accelerate not just their development cycle, but also reaching players directly, etc. So I think that that is an element of our ecosystem that we don't talk so much about, but I think, well, we're all in games, so we know that timing is crucial. So I think, up to that point, we had learned and we had developed and we had gotten better at what we were doing, and all we needed was the unlocking of being able to reach the market a little bit easier. And I think that was very critical and instrumental. When I was researching this and thinking about the ecosystem in general, I found this image that was made by Invest in Stockholm, but it actually encompasses a lot of the Nordic actors. And I liked how they've framed this because I think it's important when you talk about the Nordic ecosystem to not just look at the game studios and the games companies specifically, but that there are so many other different stakeholders and different entities on the market that are contributing to the Nordic games ecosystem. And so they've listed a few, certainly not all, of the companies and the organizations working in close proximity to the games industry. And certainly on the education side, for instance, there's been a huge push in all the countries to make sure that there's good quality education, game development educations, and there's almost like 100% employee rate amongst these educations that people go through. And we're going to talk a little bit about where I think Canadian studios can jack into this as well, because there's still a huge shortage when it comes to talent. So I just decided to add a couple of pieces to this ecosystem, because I think that we've had incubators and accelerators that have played a really big role. And right now, when the industry is doing really well, they're also setting up a lot of incubators and accelerators outside of the big cities. So trying to start clusters in places that you wouldn't maybe necessarily see much game development. And so I think that's very interesting, because we all know that not everyone can live in the big cities. And if we can copy some of the success that we've had in the bigger cities in smaller versions across our countries, I think we're onto a winning concept for sure. All right, some numbers. It's easy to talk. Oh, we're so great, we're so, but just in terms of it being reflected in the numbers as well. And looking at the presentations before me, I think these numbers are already outdated, but I took them from the latest Spelutvecklar Index, which is the report that the Swedish games industry puts together. But just to give you an idea of what this can look like translated in numbers. And I also found this, which I thought was really a nice summary based off of our exercise today, where you can see that there is actually a lot of similarities in terms of penetration of game developers in our respective countries. And so I think already there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration, seeing as not only do we have the numbers, but we probably also have a lot of focus and support in around us as well, that we can leverage into creating opportunities. We talked a little bit about investments, and I think for the first time ever, I saw a presentation at Invest Game, this report, there's links to everything in here as well, where Sweden has actually had a chunk on the global market when it comes to M&As and investments. And I think that it's not too shabby looking at the size and looking at the global market as a whole, both in terms of in terms of like numbers, but in terms of number of deals as well. So so if anyone is interested in reading more about that, I put in a slide. Okay, so now why we're here, and I think one of the reasons why you're wanting to learn a little bit more about our regions. What are some of the opportunities that I see? And so Anton was talking a little bit about the fact that, well, maybe it's not global, but at least international. We have a very international approach in everything that we do, which means that our markets are international. And so there's already less of an issue. Almost everything is in English already. So there's less of an issue when it comes to communication. Just checking my time here. Many companies already have subsidiaries outside of the Nordics. So both in terms of learning how to work with studios and entities in different time zones that communicate a little bit differently, that do it. We've all learned through this pandemic year to work a little bit more on distance, but it's still, when you have that experience in your repertoire, I think it's easier to work together. There's a huge shortage of talent. I told you that everyone that goes through an education here pretty much gets picked up and employed straight away. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity here for studios from other countries, Canada, to come in and sort of help companies overcome this talent shortage. And so that's a very, very tangible thing that we could probably grow. I'm not going to say how much, but we could grow a lot more if we had more access to talent. I mentioned M&As and acquisitions and investments. We have very knowledgeable investors across our regions, which I think is also something that if you tap into that and if you collaborate with investors that know what they're doing and can be good partners, that's also a way for you to accelerate growth and accelerate, having more success. I said we have experienced publishers. We've gone from the early days to, learning the hard way how we want to publish games and how to self-publish, etc. So there's an experienced publisher pool to tap into if you want to be able to market and get your games out on a global market. And then let's see, I can't actually see my last point. There we go. Oh yeah, and then the strong listed environment. I mean, we've actually had people, especially in Sweden now, companies from all over, not just the Nordic region, coming to the Swedish stock exchange Nasdaq to list their companies because there's a lot of interest and because there's a very, very strong environment here. So there's a lot of opportunities there as well for overseas studios. All right, so what do publishers and investors look at? In the business deals that I've been involved in, we looked a lot at cultural fit in terms of like employees being able to work well together, but also in terms of community and player base, if there's a nice fit there. Portfolios fit, of course. A lot of the people the investors and the publishers will actually list very, very clearly on their own websites what they're looking for. So you don't have to waste your time going after someone who's not even looking at the segment where you're active. Look at studios that can run projects independently, which is obviously with the distance as well, very important. Studios that can amplify growth in one way or another, either their own growth or the growth of the particular publisher or the parent company. And also studios that can fit into groups, probably more relevant when it comes to the acquisition part. I and my team, we look very much at teams that are building a great game, but not just a great game, but also a studio that's actually interested in building a company. And we very rarely invest just based off of one game, because we know that relationship is long-term, and we look at the first game as sort of like the trial run, and the more games you release together, the better the outcome for everyone. So it's a long-term relationship. All right, just really quickly, a couple of the trends that we're seeing in our region now. I've already mentioned the acquisition part. So if that's something that you're interested in, now is a good time. We don't know when this window is going to close, but it's been a phenomenal year for acquisitions. There are several new funds that have been launched, often with very, very knowledgeable investors connected to them. So that's definitely something that we can look into. Not all of them invest outside of the Nordics, but certainly some do. There are a lot of big IP projects coming into the region as well. So again, if that's something that you're interested in collaborating on or participating in, I'm sure that there could be interesting conversation with those studios. And then again, one of the things that I think is super crucial for our success in this region is that we've had a lot of successful game entrepreneurs that are now reinvesting into the ecosystem and thus accelerating it and making it continue with new studios, new investments, not just in terms of experience, but also in terms of capital. And that concludes a snapshot of why I think the Nordic region has a lot of opportunities to offer. And I hope I've given you a little bit of a thought in terms of where you could fit in here. And you're more than welcome to contact me. If I don't have the answer to your question, I can always try and pass you along to someone that does. And I think my colleagues that were on before me as well have a lot of detailed information about specific countries as well, if you're interested in that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Susanna. And in fact, so Susanna, I do have two questions for you. One of which is, you've met with many people looking for funds. What are the mistakes that they should not make when they approach an investor?
I think one of the things that is my personal pet peeve, it might not be others, but it's being able to translate the experience that you have into something that is relevant for the venture that you're going on, right? So the fact that you have maybe 20 years in a specific studio doesn't automatically mean that you'll be good at starting a project from scratch or starting a studio from scratch. So if you're able to sort of be open about that fact, but being able to leverage that experience, but not necessarily make it equal to you're going to be phenomenally successful because you held a certain role for 20 years in one company. I think that's a good way to start, and I always look at that. And then, do we have any other mistakes? Yeah, maybe just not necessarily just for our industry, but in general, looking at trends and then saying, World of Warcraft sold this much. So if we only make a certain percentage of what World of Warcraft sold, then, we'll be hugely successful, but actually really being able to make some kind of realistic calculations based off of more than just the most successful projects in the industry.
Thank you. By the way, can you stop the presentation?
Oh, of course.
And we do have some questions coming in, so I'll let you stop. Okay, thank you. So Tony is asking, can we ask for publishers support for any size of titles, from a small platformer to a big AAA game? And that question is for you, Susanna, and anyone else who wants to complete.
So my experience is it totally depends on the publisher. I know for a fact with Paradox, for instance, once Paradox grew to a certain size, it was hard for us to look at really, really small projects because the apparatus of the publisher is so big that if you have a really, really small project, it just doesn't make sense. So theoretically, yes, but I think it's really important to look at like portfolio fit for that particular publisher and see how you can fit in there. When it comes to AAA, a lot of the times I've seen the big projects go after the funds because the funds and the VCs lends themselves really well to the big projects. I hope that answers the question.
Anyone else wants to comment on this?
Well, the question was about size for different titles and publishers. Was that question?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's definitely these days. There's definitely room for more type of games. Not too many years ago, we usually said that there was like this impossible gap between 5 million Swedish kronor and 50, so that would be equivalent to $500,000 or $5 million American dollars, and that between those sums of money was really hard to get funding. So really small projects or these huge ones like AAA projects, what we could find money for. But these days, I think there's more diverse, definitely more diverse scene of VCs and in project investment and publishers. So yes, the answer would be yes.
Suvi, anything else on that? Okay. The other question is addressed to all of you. Has the pandemic changed trends, and how?
Well, I think looking at the game like Valheim, for example, or Among Us is an even better example. Like that game hadn't been successful before, and it was picked up by people and word of mouth mostly, and some influencers, of course, playing it, and it's a huge indie hit from nowhere. And it's not like objectively there are better social deduction games out there, but not a lot of them, and people don't know about them, and they're not that famous, not that easy to find. So they tapped into that game genre that people have tried to do for, I don't know, 10 years at least. I've seen people trying to make games like that, and I've seen better games like that, but that particular game was really lucky, and it was a global pandemic and people needed to hang out, and it was a super nice and easy way to hang out, and it just became a thing. And you can be lucky like that, but that's not what we should aim for, I think. But yes, it changed a lot, especially for multiplayer games and for how we hang out online.
Anyone else?
I think that it doesn't really show. Of course, I mostly always look from the Finnish game industry side of, but I think that it doesn't really show yet on the trends. But I have heard that there's lots of delay and kind of avoiding risks in with the investors and the publishers. So in the worst case, it's kind of making it a little bit more dull for coming games. But let's say that's something that we cannot really see yet, but it might be in the future. And also, what game developers has been complaining or has been a little bit struggling is that there is quite a different kind of players at the moment. So it's also for the players are changing, not only games, but who are the players are changing a little bit at the moment.
Susanna, anything
Yeah,
else?
and just complementing to what Sylvie said, I also think games have stepped into a more mainstream room in a way. Before it used to be a specific type of culture, and now everybody's playing games, and the whole conversation about it being bad to play games is now it's good to play games because we saw the effects of that in the pandemic. So I think maybe that's why we're seeing a lot of new type of players in the gaming space as well. But in general, I think we've rediscovered the value of having communities and having good interaction between players around the games. And so I'm seeing a lot of strategies and investments happening on the community side when it comes to game development.
And do you see, Sophie, I think you mentioned that the publisher investors are more risk averse. I think that's what you said. Did you see that as well, Susanna?
It's since a lot of the people that I interact with are listed companies as well. They're not really allowed to talk about the deals that they do or not. But when it comes to the unlisted smaller companies, and especially early stages that I'm in, we've seen a lot of capital going to the stock exchange instead of going to the unlisted market, and hopefully we'll see that change back to being vibrant everywhere again.
Okay. And while we have you, Jason is asking, can you comment on the mistake of developers asking for project funding from VCs? Many seem to mistake project versus company funding.
Yeah, that's actually one of the main, I feel like a lot of the people who are working with investments now and publishing and acquisitions try to educate a lot of developers in the difference between this, like equity funding is not the same as project funding. And while I think there's more options on the market now, I think we need to continue talking about the fact that this is a very different thing, and the people who are knowledgeable, because there are a lot of knowledgeable investors out there, they will make that clear when they speak to developers and ask them to make their homework again. But it's like super important to understand that these are two different parts. And I want to say my colleagues or my friends, Amplify Group, have actually sent out a super good information and a presentation template for that, understanding what the difference is between equity funding and publishing funding, and what they would like to see if you are looking for one or the other. So we'll see if we can find the link for that and maybe share.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Anton, we had a question for you earlier that I missed. Somebody was asking if there are some public funding programs in Sweden.
No.
From government.
Unfortunately, not. They're not anything specific for games. There are some general, like innovative startups through the innovation agency in Sweden, but not anything supporting games. No.
Suvi, is there anything like that in Finland?
Yeah, there's Business Finland, which was formerly known as Tekes. Jason knows that well. Jason has been collaborating with Tekes and Business Finland. Business Finland is a public funding from government, of course, to technology, and it's kind of taxpayers' investment to the tech, but also for the game industry. And it has had a really crucial role, especially in the early stages of the companies, because it's quite risky money, but it still doesn't take any stakes of the companies. So that's a opportunity which we are really proud of. Also, I would like to comment about this, that I think there is a need for both kind of funding, for the project funding and the company funding. And I also think that it depends quite a lot about the platform. If you are a mobile game developer, it might not be a good idea to fund, from my opinion, to fund certain projects, because it can fly or not, and you should find out pretty soon on the early stage, will it fly or not, and then there should be an opportunity to try again and try again and try again. But that's not something that you can do with the AAA productions, that you just try and oops, it didn't work. And so in that case, right, you should try to focus in the project funding, and in the more like free-to-play games, you should be funding the factory of the free-to-play games.
Another question from Vache. Are there any categories that are exempt from industry initiatives? And I'm assuming, investors, publishers, for example, casino gaming type games. Anyone want to take that on?
Yes, I mean, we don't accept casinos or gambling or any betting activities within our members or among our members. So you have to be a pure game developer and not a slot machine developer if you want to be a member in our association and be in our family. So
what about investors? Go ahead.
Sorry.
The Finnish law is also saying that we have a monopoly in the gambling, so there cannot be any Finnish gambling companies, and even that I mean developing in Finland, and there is only one. It's Veikkaus, and it's from the government. So and we kind of want to keep it separated also.
Susanna, anything? No. And I'm assuming, Susanna, that there are some investors interested, but it's not the majority of them.
Sorry, what did you say? You're assuming?
That there are some investors that would be interested in casino-like games.
Oh, that sector is huge in Sweden and has done really, really well. So there are a lot of, I don't know much about it, but it's absolutely a very, very big sector. Right. And they're also having a lot of success internationally. So definitely.
And would you know if the interested investors will be at Nordic Game to meet with companies?
I would imagine not, mainly because the industries try to keep a little bit separate, especially like in Sweden, gaming, we only have one word for it. There's no like separation between gaming and gambling, so they get mixed up a lot. So I think that like both industries try to keep it a bit separate to make it more clear. But I'm sure we could find out what would be some good avenues to meet with companies and investors in that sector.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Tony. What are the main interests of the publishers at this moment in terms of genres of games?
If I can answer that, I think like in general, publishers want to invest in projects they understand. So they usually invest in games that are similar to games they have invested in before, or games that they have been developing themselves. So for example, Coffee Stain, who invested in Deep Rock Galactic, the Danish game that he talked about before. They have made creative crafting, exploration, action games, and then they invest in similar games to that because they understand the players and they understand how you make money from that and how you build a community and so forth. So, and also they believe that genre will grow. So they are like a part of that ecosystem already. And I think it's similar to free-to-play publishers. King have been publishing games and they have been free-to-play, mid-core or casual as well. So that's, I think, the most common way to invest for publishers.
Any other comments? Are there like multiplayer social games? Any major trend you're seeing? No.
Major trend, I would say, like Susanna, at Paradox, you invested in a bunch of different projects, and how did you decide on that?
So we had a period that we called the crazy period, where we basically, it was a shotgun approach. We did everything, new teams, new genres, new games, new models. It was everything. And so I think now the lesson has been to try and tighten it down a little bit more, and at least have, like, you know, Paradox has a specific portfolio with 3 or 4 genres that they focus on, and they're very, very open about what they're looking for on their website. So I think a lot of the publishers have the same, and it would be impossible to say something generic. So I think that it would be a question of, like, looking at the different publishers and what they're focusing on. And then you have the publishers who are looking for more experimental things like Raw Fury and those kind of publishers who are looking for new all the time.
It makes sense, of course, in as a Paradox, because it's also cross promotion thing, that it's good to have a certain type of games. But I think I find it funny that you said that crazy times. That I think the Finnish investors are currently having their crazy times, because they're really widely investing in all the different genres, all the platforms, and everything. So 360, big anything. So I don't know. Yeah,
maybe that's
but building on that point then is a lot of the times investors invest in teams rather than specific genres or specific. So I think that it's you know, that's also a super crucial component to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. And
Anton,
I think Suvi really has a point there. There's definitely a lot of companies that are just, they all of a sudden have this pile of money, and they find interesting projects that might be different from what they had worked on before, but they believe in them and they invest in them. So I think if they don't have a huge portfolio of similar games as a publisher, then you might have a shot, even though your game is different from theirs. But if you look at Raw Fury, for example, they are very like artsy, and they have a certain, like, they want, looking for magic, they say. And if you look at their portfolio and your game is more kind of wacky physics, fun, multiplayer game, they might not be for you. But these younger companies, I think, or newer that publishers like Sordix or Thunderful are more looking broadly for like opportunities.
And I would also see it as a risk management, that you're putting your eggs in different bags as an investor, when you are not investing only to certain genre or certain type of games. So it makes sense in that point also.
So Jamie is asking 2 questions, and I think, Susanna, you've addressed one of them. So Susanna, can you confirm that you've seen an increase in Nordic game companies looking to list and go public?
At least
Yes.
in Finland. Sorry. Oh,
yes.
you.
No, go for it. No. I think like Finland as well, for sure. But yes, there's been a definite increase, and also because games are doing really well now, so a lot of companies are taking that step. Go ahead, Suvi.
Yeah, and also one Finnish company is listed in the Stockholm. So I think it's a part of maturation in the game industry in Nordic, that they are getting more mature and stable and so on, all the adult things.
Definitely. And I think also, looking at it from the investment point of view, the advisors and everyone involved in the process of bringing games companies to the market are so much more knowledgeable now than just 5 years ago. Like, there's the support and the understanding of how games work and what kind of return you can expect is so much greater now amongst investors and everyone who's helping out around that.
Makes sense. Anton, I'm going to ask you to get you to start on the eSport question. And how important is esports to the Nordic game scene? And is there a close integration?
I definitely think that there's a valuable, like, cross-pollination between esports and our industry, but it's a different industry. So we've seen some of our members try to, you know, dive into and make their games into esports, and our lesson from that is that it has to happen organically, that you can't really buy yourself a community of esport players, but that happens by, you know, grassroots movements type of communities. So it's a different, we'll view it as a different industry from ours, that it's definitely, we have esport players that are big, and I think the interest of games, I mean, definitely translates into starting to be part of the industry eventually, for a lot of people. So there's definitely connection there, but it's a different industry with other problems and challenges. And yeah.
So does the esport industry contributes back to the game production ecosystem, or it's
separate, I would say.
Okay.
And that's been a lot of the challenge, and a lot of actually the disputes between developers and the ones organizing esport events. If you look at Blizzard and Valve, for example, and the other ones who have been organizing apart from them, so they have had to partner up in different ways, and that's its own kind of story and chapter of events.
But maybe some marketing, you get some visibility for your games, of course. But I totally agree, it's a totally different industry, and it's difficult to create an esports game company. It's not the way to do it.
Susanna, any comment?
Yeah, so just to add to that, I would say like every other game pitch I get now is an esports venture of some sort. So I think there is, there is movement, and I think there are investors investing in this sector. It's not a sector that I know so much about, so I tend to do the things that I know and have experience in. But for sure, there's movement here, and I think there've been a couple of quite public deals happening in this area as well. So if anyone is interested in that particular area in the Nordics, I think there's a lot of articles that can either be translated or that are already in English to read up a little bit more about that.
Okay. And would you know if the esport major players, not the people, but the companies, are going to be at Nordic Games, or again, it's like gaming and it's completely separate?
Do you know, Anton? I wouldn't know.
I definitely see some esport type of ventures attending our events, definitely, especially the ones who do tech, for example, anti-cheat technology and tools to support your game. If you're making a multiplayer game and you don't want a lot of cheaters and a community of of really angry gamers, that can be great. So there's definitely like technology and midware companies that have a close relationship with our industry. But for the actually, running competitions and that type of stardom and stuff is very separate from that's more for DreamHack and the type of players who I mean are part of our family in definitely, but still they run a different thing.
Okay, and we'll take one last question before we wrap up from Tony. Are you interested in considering projects only for publishing and not funding the development of the project? How much time do you need before release? I think maybe that one for Susanna first.
If you're talking about us specifically, most of the companies that we work with, we do equity investments, so they would often have like a publishing partner or something that they work with. So that's not something that we get involved in. The general answer to the question, I've seen all of it, but in general, I've seen publishers wanting to get involved from the beginning, and then the model can look differently depending on how much money they have to invest into the project.
Sophie, Anton, any comment?
We really don't have a publishers in Finland, so I think I can't comment about that.
I would say there are publishers for that, but it's kind of more niche, and it's usually if you're not looking for funding and you're only looking for PR or a partner for maybe get to some marketplace, there are companies for that as well. So I'm not sure. I think you could have other consultants or some type of other service if you want help with other things and not development. And if you have money for it, you don't have to give away a 30 or 50% rev share as well. So that might be
Right
there. Yeah.
Okay, so we have to wrap up, but that was fantastic. Thank you, Anton, Sophie, Susanna, Jesper, Jakob. That's going to make a difference. The type of information you shared is going to help people make decisions as to their next step, especially if they go to the Nordic Game. I also want to thank you, my colleagues from all of the provincial associations, to be part of this mission that we're organizing to Nordic Games, as well as our partners, the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, Ontario Creates, and the Canada Media Fund. So thank you all participants for your questions. And again, thank you to our speakers, and enjoy the rest of the week. Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.